Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Thomas and Friends Character Showcase. I'm Comic Fan 13, and I'm happy to bring you our special April Fool's Day video. Now, unlike most April Fool's videos, I like to keep up the same level of quality that I always do, more or less anyway, but I like to do it with a bit of a weirder topic. So, when it comes to Thomas and Friends characters, what's more of an enigma than the Aquarium cars? For those unaware, apart from a brief appearance in a dream sequence from Big World Big Adventures, the Aquarium cars have never appeared on screen. However, they have made a brief book appearance. Their main appearance in the Thomas and Friends franchise is in merchandise. They've been redesigned in both the Take and Play and the Wooden Railway range a dozen times. However, for my design, I decided to loosely base it off of the original Wooden Railway design, while giving it gray to make it look a little bit more realistic. However, that's not really saying much, considering they're still essentially fish tanks on wheels. Now, in real life, some boxcars have been used to transport live fish, but they're typically in containers. But the aquarium cars are the containers. It's quite ridiculous, but I don't think that's impossible in the world of Sodor. I mean, let's be real, weirder things have happened. I mean, we've seen flour transported in wooden wagons. In real life, do you have any idea how many safety violations that would violate? Not to mention the health code violations. I mean, everyone on Sodor should have died of food poisoning if that was realistic. So I think I can suspend my disbelief for these giant tankers. Now, I think I should start by giving the aquarium cars individual names and personalities. Throughout their incarnations, they've been faceless trucks, but I think for my purposes, I'll have them be alive. So let's start with the octopus transport. Now, I kind of like to think that they'd have a brother and sister thing going on, so I'll name her Octavia the Octopus Transport. I think the name rolls off the tongue very well, and I think it could possibly clue us in on what kind of personality she would have. With a name like Octavia, I think she would have a tone where she talks with God's plain English and a very mature matter. And I think Octavia would take everything seriously and doesn't recognize at all just how ridiculous her and her brother's designs are. Which I think to contrast this, her brother should probably be the exact opposite. I kind of like the name Sean the Shark Transport. Again, it has a nice ring to it. A name like Sean sounds a bit more casual. No offense to anyone with the name Sean. I also imagine that his accent would be similar to Octavia's, but it would be a little bit more casual. He'd be a bit more laid back and fun-loving. And I think he would also be very self-aware. He would understand just how ridiculous he and his sister look, and would probably be the first one to point out just how weird, ugly they look. But, he'd say it in a joking manner. Plus, I imagine having the job of carrying around a great white shark. I mean, that's kind of the ultimate flex on Sodor. Like, I could see something where he's arguing with Gordon, and Gordon's just like, you're just simple trucks. And while Octavia is highly offended, and she's saying like, oh, how dare you? I am Octavia, the octopus transport, the greatest of my kind. Sean is just taking none of Gordon's crap and just says, well, I'm carrying a shark. And that's Sean's reaction to everything. His argument to any opposition is, I'm carrying a shark. Like Gordon tries to bring up legitimate points why their designs are ridiculous, and his response is, I'm carrying a shark. Well, yes, you're carrying a shark, but I'm pulling the express. Yeah, and I'm carrying the shark. Yes, I get it. You're carrying a shark, but I am the grandest engine on the Northwestern Railway. Yeah, and I'm carrying a shark. Damn it, Sean, I get it. You're carrying a shark. Yeah, I'm carrying the shark. What is your point? You know what, Sean? Fine, you win. You're great. You're awesome. I'm going to my shed. And that's just how he would avoid conflict. He just annoys people to the point where they don't even want to argue with him anymore. While Octavia, on the other hand, I feel like she could very easily get into arguments just because she does not want to admit what she actually is. Like, in her eyes, she's a grand express coach. The grandest in all the British Isles. But in actuality, she's a glorified wagon. A very, very odd wagon at that. Like if their devices next to their faces broke one day and the water couldn't be cleaned constantly, they would be set up for scrap. But she doesn't want to admit that. She wants to pretend that she's the greatest thing in the world. Which, speaking of the world, I think we should start looking into how they'd react to the outside world. Like, I feel like most of the time, since they're owned by the Sodor Aquarium just for transport, they probably spend most of their time just shunted away in a yard somewhere. So, what do they do to get out and about? Well, according to their character cards from the Thomas and Friends Wikipedia, we know that they are used to transport sea creatures to all festivals and carnivals on the island of Sodor. Now, I've been to a festival or two in my time, and I don't remember ever seeing great white sharks or octopuses, but again, this is a world where trains and other vehicles can talk, so I can suspend my disbelief. Now, just based on that, I think we have an idea of one character in particular that they would likely interact with a lot. Trevor. As we know from the classic series, Trevor is often seen at festivals and garden parties and that kind of stuff. You know, taking kids for rides to raise funds for whatever the festival is raising funds for. So I think it would be interesting seeing these relatively immature, kind of full of themselves trucks interact with such an old engine such as Trevor. Like, let's say that these two are left on a siding nearby the orchard for, like, some day fair or something like that, and they're just casually talking with Trevor as kids are looking at the sea creatures inside them. Well, it is a beautiful day out here. The children seem to be enjoying themselves, and those are lovely creatures inside of you. Now, Sean would probably just take this super casually. He'd be like, oh, thanks, mate. But Octavia would have this grandioseness as it just goes to her head. Well, naturally, we have the greatest creatures in the world. You're all very privileged to come and see us. Which, after that remark, Trevor can tell exactly what kind of trucks he's dealing with. One who doesn't care enough to hold up a simple conversation, and one who makes the conversation all about her. However, I imagine Trevor would still be polite and, be civil towards them. But as soon as they left, he's like, oh, thank the Lord. Now, I think this is kind of how you should handle the aquarium cars. Like, there's nothing special to them. They're just kind of weird, bizarre trucks that kind of get on people's nerves. But just for the sake of storytelling, let's add a crisis. Let's say that the aquarium decides that they're too expensive to maintain. It's like, I imagine they only get used once or twice a year to move their fish to special events. So it's brought up that they're probably just going to end up scrapping them since it would be a lot cheaper just to hire a lorry. Now, they both react in two very different ways. They're both shocked, of course, but Octavia is more indignant. She's like, what? We are the grandest piece of rolling stock on this island. We are the grandest piece of rolling stock on God's green earth. And we deserve more respect. But as she's just ranting, Sean just kind of takes it all in and realizes just how disposable they actually are. And for once, actually shows that he cares. It says, Octavia, we need to escape. Of course we need to... What? Sean? Did you just say, we need to escape? But how? We're trucks. I don't know. Just talk to one of the engines or something. I don't know. I mean, they saved that Oliver guy a couple of years back. I'm sure they'd do the same for us, but all I know is that if we stay here, we're going to be scrapped. And I imagine for the first time in her life, Octavia actually acknowledges just how disposable and mortal she actually is, and says, "Fine. Next engine that passes through, I'll talk to them." Now, since the aquarium, according to the research I've done, it's somewhere nearby Tidmouth, so I could see someone like maybe Edward saving them, since he has a history with saving Trevor, so it's possible that if put under the situation where he learns that these two trucks are going to get scrapped, I think Edward would do all in his power to make sure that they find a home. And maybe to go with the Trevor festival thing that I brought up earlier, maybe Edward was always the one who had to transport them. And, they were always less than agreeable a lot of the time. Like, Sean was just so casual and didn't care about anything, while Octavia was always talking down to Edward. But when he hears them express that they're going to get scrapped, he can tell the difference in their tones. He knows this is serious. They are legitimately scared for their lives. So, imagine if they ended up, and although I don't really like this personally, imagine if they ended up at the search and rescue center. I know I've gone on record before saying that I don't really like Belle personally, but I accept her as a part of the Thomas canon. Imagine they ended up being her trucks. Like, instead of being transport for fish, they're there to help with Belle's water. They're essentially two water tenders for her, because as we saw in Day of the Diesels, it isn't uncommon for her to run out of water because she drains her tanks putting out fires. They could essentially be used as makeshift tenders for her so that she has more water. And from that point on, I think they would more or less just be a part of the search and rescue center fleet, which I kind of like to think that they get a new paint job to go along with it. You guys can kind of imagine that. I imagine they would match Belle, but who knows, maybe Sean would keep a dominantly red design, maybe Octavia would keep a prominently blue design. I think it could be interesting. And I kind of like to think that maybe engines like Gordon would kind of grow to like them with Belle, just because it reminds me of the Flying Scotsman with having two tenders. Yeah, I think I've more or less said my piece on them. Again, I would prefer them just to stay as aquarium cars, but I think the Sodor Search and Rescue Center thing could also be a good epilogue to them. So, I think that's all I can really say on them at the moment. Hope you enjoyed the video, and have a good day.